I want to thank you for joining us today as we continue our study series. I'm Pastor Jerry Burney, and in the series today it's on science and origins, creation or evolution. You'll notice that the subtitle on the book on the slide reads Scientific Evidence Withheld from School Textbooks. In this series we're touching on some highlights in our book on Science and Origins and its relation to the question of age, which is the major factor in the creation-evolution debate. These are just some highlights. There's much more that's examined in the book. And also, this series does not really get into the other part of the book, which is on ancient civilizations. Now, science is always changing, and we publish news and updates on our website, burneyfam.com or targettruthministries.com. We also have another study series on Genesis and the two creation accounts, and we have another study series on Revelation and end times. Now, our ministry delivers God's truth to jail and prison inmates all across the United States. So if you'd like us to mail weekly studies, and once a year we send a book out to every inmate on our list, please contact us at our website, burneyfam.com or targettruthministries.com. and just email us with their name, their ID number, and their address. We'd be glad to add them to the list. Well, we've been going through various things here as I go through these slides, and I'll bring you up to date. You can see we've covered a number of areas in science. And today we're going to be getting into magnetism, Grand Canyons, stalagmites, mountains. We covered all kinds of areas that show the Earth to be young. Today we're exploring magnetic fields. Magnetic fields. All agree that the magnetic field deteriorates over a 10,000 year period. Earth's magnetic field is declining all the time. Unless there's some method to recharge the field strength, the magnetic field will drop to zero eventually. Scientists who conceptually need an Earth billions of years old have put forth a theory that suggests there's a dynamo below the Earth's surface which reverses polarity every 10 to 70,000 years or so after the field of magnetism falls. Now, this theory has been severely challenged in recent years, and observations and measurements have given even more evidence of a young Earth, supporting scientists who believe that the Earth is young. Magnetic patterns worldwide are stronger and weaker. They're not reversals. So-called polarity reversals are not universal. From an article in Science in June, the conclusion concerning long-term changes in Earth's magnetic field is that there are no strong theoretical arguments supported by any evidence to conclude that the magnetic field reversals are related, and related field strengths are worldwide and universal events. They're just isolated local events. Localized events which cause reversals are such things as volcanic activity, asteroid impacts, other such cataclysmic events in history, but they do not suggest a core reversal of the Earth. Measurements of archaeomagnetic data from ancient pottery, bricks, things like that they've shown a general overall rate of decay, even though there was a measured period of violent changes up and down in magnetic strength thousands of years ago, which are attributed to catastrophic events, great flooding, volcanic activity, earthquakes, which have occurred in Earth's history. So all those things actually cause the magnetic field strength to be charged up a little bit each time they occur. Volcanic explosion, earthquake, something like that, an asteroid impact. These could all cause the magnetic field to recharge a little bit, and then it starts decaying again. Paleomagnetic data confirm the existence of multiple order components, such as quadrupoles and octopoles, in the past, explainable by these catastrophic events. These fluctuations and reversals show up in measurements dating back to about 4,500 years ago, and they have diminished since the last smaller fluctuation, which occurred about 1,500 years ago. Measurements accounting for maximum field strength the fluctuations and oscillations since that catastrophic period in Earth's history and current measured decay place a maximum age for the Earth at 10,000 years. This is the upper limit. Further evidence relating to magnetic field strength supporting a young age for the solar system comes from the data collected by the Voyager 2 spacecraft, as it measured Uranus and Neptune when it passed them by in space. Both planets displayed a decaying magnetic field in agreement with Earth's in age. Dr. Jason Lyle, PhD in astrophysics at the University of Colorado, studied the satellite data from the NASA program, and he concluded that the magnetic fields of all the planets are still too strong to be very old. Well, we're going to move into an area now called radiometric dating, a method used by scientists to determine the age of geology, the age of rocks, and I've got an Earth globe here, my flat Earth, and this Earth globe is, I use it as an experiment to show how scientists measure the age of the Earth. And what we start with is they measure these radiometric elements, and they start with a basic element, and I use a piece of paper in the experiment to show this. It's a basic element, and what happens with as an element decays, it changes its structure. So I change the structure by showing the paper being folded. So as an element would decay, it would get folded, and I fold it into various parts like this, and then those parts I would cut up with a pair of scissors showing more decay of the element, and we come up with these squares. And then I would have somebody trace out a drawing on these squares and cut those out with a pair of scissors showing more time. All these represent the element changing from its original state as a full sheet of paper into its final state. And this is just what radiometric material does. It decays until it reaches a final state. So if you could measure that, if you had somebody doing the folding, taking the original sheet and somebody doing the folding, and then somebody cutting out the squares, and then somebody drawing the drawing, and then somebody actually cutting out the drawing, and if we time that, and this is what scientists do, they measure decay rates by timing them. So we time each of these one at a time, and let's just say these are worth 500 each, and we know that these are going into the Earth. At 500-year intervals, at decay rate, we can measure it. We see it happening. We can actually measure the decay rate. We see this happening. And we measure these over a period of time. And then what we do is we say, okay, we know that this takes so much time for these elements to decay. And when we look at the Earth, we see the decay rate. So now let's dig up some Earth and let's measure what's in there, because we know how long it takes for it to decay. So knowing how long it takes for it to decay, that's what they do. They open up the Earth and they reach in and they grab it, and they expect to find about 6,000 years worth of decay material. And of course what they find are millions and billions of years, oodles and oodles of decayed material. Where did that come from? We measured it, we know how fast it builds up, and we know what we should find, but yet when we dig in there we find millions and billions of years with decayed material. Well, the problem is the assumption. The assumption being that this material has been there for millions and billions of years. We don't know how long the material's been there. No one was there to witness what was really there, the number of daughter elements, the number of original elements. Nobody was there to measure it. So there are serious problems with this radiometric dating. The obvious problems due to assumptions about the original amount of these radiometric materials in the rocks, and that's the obvious problem. This original amount must be known in order to make accurate measurements. However, no scientists were recording information at the beginning. Therefore, scientists assume quantities to fit the old age theories. Another problem with these various techniques is that it is known that many of the daughter elements that can easily be leached in and out of the rock could have happened with water. Harold Schlusser points out that tests show that up to 80% of potassium in samples of meteorite was removed by running water over it for 4¼ hours. And this could move the age of the rocks to tremendously high old age numbers just by running water over it. Imagine what a flood would do. And further, concerning the daughter elements, those originally in the rock, the assumption is made that in the beginning of the Earth, there were no daughter elements. That's an assumption that science makes. No daughter elements originally present. Sidney Clemson, a British consulting engineer, however, has found very large amounts of daughter elements present in very young volcanic rock. In other words, when a volcano erupts, it forms rock. That rock, we know the age of it because we know the age when the lava forms. And yet within that lava we find large amounts of daughter elements. Clemson, a British engineer, recently made a study of 18 rock samples from 12 volcanoes, as published in the USSR, and 10 samples from the Faroe Azores, Tristan da Cunha, and Mount Vesuvius. And in all cases, the calculated uranium-lead ages were millions and billions of years, but the rocks were known to be quite young, because they knew when the eruptions had occurred. There are serious problems with a great variety of possible experimental errors and shaky assumptions, according to Nobel Prize medalist Dr. Melvin Cook. In fact, many dates have had to been discarded because of too many variables. For example, in the Journal of Geophysical Research, it is reported that lava rocks formed in 1800 and 1801 in Honolulu, Hawaii, show an age of formation of 160 million to 3 billion years by using a potassium-argon dating method. The report goes on to say that these rocks do not prove valid, as the rocks are known to have been formed by the volcanic eruptions in 1800 and 1801. Another report in Science shows that potassium-argon dates of 12 to 21 million years for rocks known to be less than 200 years old. The age for a rock is when it is formed, such as when it cools after a volcanic eruption. Mount St. Helens erupted in 1980, and its rocks date to 2.4 million years old. Bear in mind that radiometric materials are not found in sedimentary rock, so only volcanic rock can be used to date these flows. Now let's assume a volcano explodes like Mount St. Helens, and a man is killed and buried in the volcanic ash and rock which forms. And the rock tests to be 160 million years old. Is the man 160 million years old? That's exactly what we're doing in science today when we dig up things that are found in rock formations. Now, granite. We talked about granite rock last time having to be formed in a cool state. That's one of the areas which has stumped scientists for a long time, how granite can form. One of the areas which still stumps scientists today is how granite was formed. If scientists melt down granite, it does not reform back into granite. Furthermore, polonium halos, which are found in granite, actually only form in a cool state, and they form in a matter of minutes. All this means that granite probably formed quickly and in a cool state, and there's no conventional scientific theory which can explain this, unless of course granite was created, or as explained in the ice section we discussed last time, it could have been formed in a cool state just by the same event that possibly quick froze the mammoths. Similar type of event like that. Okay. We're going to talk about another form of radiometric dating, which is carbon-14 dating. And get over to the page here. Carbon-14 dating is a technique. It's subject to the same restrictions and variables as other radiometric methods. Carbon-14 testing has shown its half-life varies from 5 to 10%, depending upon its environment. The neutron in the environment of the nucleus is a stable particle, but as a free particle, the neutron has a half-life of only 8 minutes. This is compared to the normal half-life in the range of 5,200 to 5,700 years. So you can see there's plenty of room for error. Carbon-14 is formed in the upper atmosphere by nitrogen being converted by cosmic radiation to carbon-14. Plants and animals use this carbon-14 as well as ordinary carbon-12. as they're both absorbed with equal ease by tissues and cells. Carbon-14 decays into nitrogen. And when a plant or animal dies, it no longer breathes, it no longer consumes carbon, and the trapped carbon-14 in the tissue begins to decay. By measuring the ratio of carbon-12 to carbon-14, an age can be assigned. That's the theory. Now, when this process was first developed and used, certain assumptions were made. One assumption was that the ratio of carbon-14 to carbon-12 in our atmosphere today has always been constant. Measurements, however, made by the U.S. space program recently have found that the upper atmosphere has much more carbon-14 than estimated, which invalidated all previous dating. It seems that scientists, assuming that the Earth is billions of years old, also assumed that the ratio of carbon-14 to carbon-12 had reached its equilibrium a long time ago. But calculations show that the equilibrium of carbon-14 to carbon-12 to carbon-14 would take about 30,000 years. So it takes 30,000 years for them to reach equilibrium. And when the U.S. space program found higher levels of carbon-14 at high altitudes, it was proof that equilibrium had not yet been reached. And in fact, that thousands of years ago, there was even less carbon-14 than today. Again, this provides proof of a young Earth age. Now, as of 2003, scientists have been able to improve the testing and dating techniques of carbon-14 with ultra-sensitive instruments. Scientists are now able to extend their measurements up to 90,000 years, whereas it used to be 50,000. But scientists were surprised to discover that all specimens have measurable amounts of carbon-14 with the newer techniques. This means that no specimens can possibly be older than 90,000 years, much less than millions and billions of years as suggested for all these fossil finds. Professor Robert Whitelaw in Virginia Polytechnic, in a paper titled Time, Life, and History in the Light of 15,000 radiocarbon dates, he concluded that none were over 7,000 years old. A statistical analysis by Professor Whitelaw of the 15,000 specimens showed a worldwide disappearance of man and animals for a long period about 5,000 years ago. This would appear to be the result of a worldwide catastrophic event. These specimens included wide varieties of materials, including Neanderthal man bones, saber-toothed tigers, mammoth, coal, natural gas, crude oil, all kinds of organic material. Specimens that Whitelaw studied include samples in strata identified as being Pliocene, Pleistocene, and even Ecocene, which are theorized by scientists using the conventional method of old periods to be up to 50 million years old. Also specimens from deep ocean deposits and cores from 40 feet below ocean beds containing the detritus of most primitive forms of life have been dated by Professor Whitelaw, and none of these old specimens, theorized to be millions of years old, can possibly be more than thousands of years old. Now, I've got this tree ring slide up here showing how carbon-14 and tree ring data are being used to kind of compensate for some of the problems in the carbon-14 dates. Tree ring data is used today to correlate and correct for readings of carbon-14. There's supposedly an error between 100 and 150 years from about 1000 AD to 50 BC, and 200 to 800 year error from about 500 BC to 5000 BC for carbon-14 data. For example, if a carbon-14 date shows 2500 BC, then the corrected date correlated to tree ring data would be another 500 years more, or 3000 BC. The tree ring data assumes only, and this is how the tree ring data is used, it assumes only one growth ring period of 45 days per year. So in other words, you see a tree ring, it represents a 45-day growth period. Of course, trees have been known to have several growth periods in 45 days in a single year. So it turns out that the carbon-14 readings, which scientists agree are faulty, are being correlated by tree ring data, which scientists agrees is also known to be faulty. I'll read you an article here. It's about tree ring data. It says, scientists uses tree ring data to correct for carbon-14 problems. As reported in Acts and Facts, new data gathered by science in recent studies shows that tree rings represent growth cycles in wet periods and not annual growth periods, which had been theorized. The quote is, it has been found that all trees, even slow-growing ones, respond dynamically to tiny environmental changes, even hourly changes in growing conditions. Unusual storms with abundant rainfall interspersed with dry periods can produce multiple rings, essentially one per major storm. Therefore, tree rings do not correlate to annual growth periods, as had been theorized by science, trying to fix carbon-14 dating problems. So just as in ice cores, when we discussed ice cores last time, the annual rings of ice cores do not represent years, they represent melt and freeze, many of which could occur in a single year, and it has been observed by actual observation of science that this is true. So when you go into ice cores and point out and try to go back 12,000 years by looking at 12,000 ice rings, you're actually looking at only around 4,000. And the same is true in tree data. Tree data is showing that tree rings, you can have multiple tree rings in a single year. They're not necessarily one per year. We're going to take a look now at Yellowstone Park. Yellowstone Park is an interesting place. And there are 27 separate layers of trees and sediment in Yellowstone Park. And evolutionists have for years suggested that each layer represents thousands of years. And therefore, if you multiply 27 layers of trees by several thousand years each, you end up with evidence of evolution and millions of years. However, as Mount St. Helens has shown, it's very possible for a great flooding event to lay down several layers of trees, each in a separate layer of sediment. Studies done recently on the trees in Yellowstone Park have shown that these 27 layers of trees all have matching tree rings, indicating they were once all part of a common forest which was destroyed in a great flood. I wonder which great flood that was. So what they found both at Yellowstone Park and at Mount St. Helens, and it's only because of Mount St. Helens erupting during our lifetime that we've been able to observe this, is that the trees are washed out by, as you recall, at Mount St. Helens, there was a great flooding event too. At the same time the volcano went off, all the lakes and everything let go. The trees were all washed down into great basins, and they settled there, many trees in an upright position, and many in different layers of sediment. So you have trees in this layer, trees in this layer, trees in this layer, trees in this layer. For a long time at Yellowstone, they assumed these were thousands of years apart from each other. Then an event buried these trees, and some other event buried these trees, and they had 27 layers like that. And at Mount St. Helens, they also have many layers. But when you analyze the tree rings, they realize that these are all from a common forest. The tree rings all match. So it was one event that laid down many layers with trees and many layers. And it looked like it might be millions of years, but it turned out to be a single event happening only thousands of years ago. Well, we'll go up now and we'll take a look at fossils, evolution, and whether it's micro or macro evolution. And we'll be looking a little bit now, and we'll be concluding this next time. We'll take a look at this again. But we're going to start out by taking a look, and we're going to talk about trilobite in this. There's a trilobite fossil. You can pick these up at a variety of fairs and yard sales around the country. There's usually somebody around there with a whole basket full of trilobite fossils. You can pick them on for $5–10. And they're kind of an interesting thing. Trilobites predate the dinosaurs. And one of the interesting things about trilobites is they have one of the most sophisticated eyes known to us today. A compound eye that's more sophisticated than many eyes today. And yet, at the very beginning of the Cambrian layer, you'll find these trilobite fossils with their eyes at the very beginning, fully developed, already there. No transitional forms. And trilobites existed before the dinosaurs and after the dinosaurs. One of the areas that has confounded scientists is not only finding footprints with dinosaurs, but also finding footprints with trilobites, which even predate the dinosaurs. How is all that possible? Well, it's only possible if there was some catastrophic event like a flood that might have caused it. So we're going to talk a little bit about fossils, evolution, and micro and macro. Of all the areas of science relating to age, the fossil evidence is the most overwhelming. Scientists using long time periods for age, they need long time frames in order to naturally, in theory anyway, give time for macroevolution to occur. Macroevolution requires a large amounts of time for new information to be added to the DNA pool of a species so that it can change into a different species, a new life form. Now, scientists disagree on whether complex DNA changes can occur without killing the species, as all studies show that most mutations actually kill the next generation. In fact, the numbers are quite high. When about 10,000 mutations, one may be positive. The other 9,999 could kill you. All science agrees that microevolution within species does occur. There's no argument about that. This type of evolution occurs because the species selects information which is already available within its DNA. And this microevolution does not result in a different species, only changes within a species. And quite often the finches are used in the Galapagos Island by people pointing towards evolution. And there is an evolution there, it's microevolution. The beaks may become smaller, may become bigger, may become thicker, may become shorter or longer in order to accommodate for hunting for food. And that's true of all species. Every species changes. Human beings change. And Neanderthals, the skulls of Neanderthals look very old, but as they found out, the Eskimos have very similar features to what Neanderthals did. So in other words, the Neanderthal exists today. Same thing with bacteria. We all know that bacteria changes very rapidly. This is all with bacteria still becomes bacteria, man still becomes man, the finches still become finches. They do not become macroevolution and change into a different species. Now, scientists who believe in macroevolution of one species changing into a different species, they propose theories of very old Earth ages and very old age for fossils. Large periods of time are needed to support their supposed idea of species being able to change into different life forms. Additionally, in order for long time theories in evolution to work, these fossils must appear in different ages or strata of rock. And as mentioned earlier, these strata are theorized by some scientists to represent long ages of sedimentary buildup. Thus, dinosaurs are theorized to be from one age and humans from another. Of course, as we've already shown in previous sections, the geologic column of strata do not represent ages at all, but catastrophic events. And there's a whole section here on index fossils. Well, I want to thank you for joining us today in our study series. I hope you're enjoying it. We'll resume next time, but if you know of somebody in jail or prison, please have them contact our ministry at burneyfam.com or targettruthministries.com and give us their name, ID number, and address, and we will be glad to send them weekly messages. And once a year, we send out a book to every inmate on our list. Thank you.